Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. What's up, guys? It's Big Paul here today with Coach Kolton. What's up, Kolton?
Not too much, man. How you doing?
Man, a couple things have happened since the last time we talked.
A lot of things, yeah.
We had the Arnold. We had the whole erythritol stuff that had set the bodybuilding world on fire.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh my God. I stirred up so much controversy with that one. People, some people thinking they're going to die, and other people, freaking out and telling me that I was full of shit. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Jesus, you'd think I just told a 5-year-old that Santa Claus isn't real.
Like, people have the biggest attachments to things, and then once you're like, oh, there might be this problem, they're like, what? That can't be true. I'm like, oh, whatever. It's like, for me, and I realized like the study was kind of hard to correlate. And the guy, what was the doctor's name you had on? He was
Avi Bitterman.
Yeah, he was cool. He broke it down in a really understandable and digestible way for most people, but he was right. It was looking at serum elevations in erythritol and not necessarily the addition of erythritol in the diet. I think that's a big caveat people didn't know at first, but it is correlated with obesity and diabetes. So there is that, but I don't think, I think all things considered, if you're healthy in general, like, who fucking cares?
Yeah, I mean, the way, I don't know, it's like having a couple drinks if you're healthy. If you're in a disease state, you probably don't want to be putting additional stress on your body. But from what I gathered from the study is they didn't go into it initially looking for erythritol. They were just looking for other factors that were contributing to these disease states. So they were studying, everybody was freaking out. Well, these were diseased people. I'm like, well, no shit. They were looking at diseased people to see what other things might be present that they had missed in the past. And one common thing they noticed were the elevated erythritol levels. But as you pointed out, it's sort of a chicken and an egg thing. Was this because they're in a disease state, or was it because they were consuming large amounts of erythritol?
Yeah.
Now, with that said,
research.
With that said, I heard one of the doctors pointing out that this may be a good thing for testing, diagnostic testing going forward, that they can look for high erythritol levels as a potential marker for increased clotting risk.
Yeah.
So that's something to be aware of. It may or may not even be related to erythritol consumption. So they're going to have to do further study.
That would actually be a really interesting YouTube video one of us should do, where we superdose erythritol and then go get serum testing done, see if it elevates serum erythritol. And then,
see if we die.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all you need to do to test me is get me on contest prep. That's why I was freaking out, man, because half my diet was fucking erythritol and contest prep.
It's bad, man.
I was living off of truvia.
The Mio, the like orange Mio stuff, man. Oh my God. I'll consume that. Like, I would, in prep, I literally drank 2 gallons of water with that in it every day. And it was like a lot. It was like way too much.
Yeah, I was using Mio. I was using sugar-free lemonade in my water. I would drink a lot of, Coke Zeros. I got one right in front of me. Although that doesn't have erythritol. It's another sugar alcohol. But and then I was getting Truvia, which is, it's funny that they promote it as a stevia product, and it's like 95% erythritol.
Right. It's super weird. It's interesting too, because like it's the only sweetener, non-nutritive sweetener that we endogenously produce. And it's like I would be really curious, because I haven't looked into it, but how they figured that out. They're like, oh, this thing gets endogenously produced by carbohydrate metabolism. Like, let's use that as a sweetener. Or I don't know how it came about, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it was neat. Avi was going through the pathway in which it breaks down. I'm sure you saw it. I don't have it in front of me, but it seems to be a regulatory system for body. Like, when people start running high glucose levels, your body starts cranking this shit out to deal with it, converting it. Wonder how is it through the liver that it metabolizes it into that?
Or so. Yeah. I can't remember the exact enzymes responsible, but it is you have like glucose and fructose metabolism, and it works down the pathway of glucose metabolism some way, shape, or form. But I mean, that's pretty complicated, like carbohydrate metabolism stuff. And I didn't honestly understand it in its complexity, because I didn't even realize this was a thing to be concerned about until it came out. Like that study came out, you published the video, and I was like, what is this shit? And then I started kind of looking into it. So
wouldn't it be something if Quest bars and Monster Energy drinks are what making all these bodybuilders drop from blood clots?
Hey, there's an uptick in that kind of stuff going around. So
I mean, it could be other things we don't know, but
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. My thought process was, if you want it to be conservative and be careful, when you're on contest prep, you're already in a compromised state. If you want it to be extra cautious, it might be intelligent just to maybe pull back on it on contest prep. At least thinking about it from my own, I mean, because I'm already sort of diabetic anyway, and you know, you're doing things to make your blood thicker on contest prep, and just you're dehydrated. You're some probably, you know, have erythrocytosis. I mean, there's just a bunch of other shit going on. Maybe something that could potentially increase clotting factors might not be smart.
Yeah. And I actually just I posted on my Instagram like a study about cannabis causing like cortical thinning in certain individuals, and someone commented like, well, this study is not really inclusive, like I wouldn't draw conclusions with this kind of data. And my reply to him was like, well, that's why data's out there, to like subjectively, in a way, kind of formulate how you might approach certain risk factors. And even though that test was not necessarily looking at erythritol consumption, it's like, hey, that might be something that's like an inroads to looking at erythritol in its entirety, and maybe doing a further study. I wouldn't say like, you know, it's just like how sucralose modifies the human GI tract. That data is not super compelling, but like for me personally, the risk might not be worth the benefit. And so like I look at studies kind of like that. Like I like to be a skeptic and not necessarily follow what everyone else thinks. And if there's like even a slight correlation, it's like that causes me to at least think like, what could happen, or what are we missing here that I'm not seeing? And I assess the risk on my own kind of agenda, I suppose. So
I just kind of went back to basics. I was telling guys, like, eating a bunch of super processed food is like, when is it ever good for you?
Right. And now, like, just let your gut be the, you know, like I know when I drink fucking Diet Coke, like I'm farting, I'm burping, I get acid reflux, you know, like I know that it's not biologically efficient. I know that much. So,
well, anybody that's drank more than 2 Monsters in a day knows what happens.
Oh my God, yeah. That's like,
or a Monster and a Quest bar together. Oh boy,
that's a mess, man.
Dude. You need a seatbelt for the toilet. At least I do.
Yeah, I mean, even like, dude, even some whey concentrate. Like, if you get a really bad brand out there, that stuff can wreck you. I mean, I've had dudes complaining about farting, and like their wife can't take them anymore. And I'm like, well, let's look through the diet, and it's like 3 scoops of whey concentrate throughout the day, and it's like that stuff can wreck you too. And some people might not consider that processed food, but that's fucking processed food, and some of those things do have erythritol in them. So
yeah, and that's been another one that people get mad at me about, is I really try to steer people away from protein powders.
Yeah.
I mean, I do use some protein powders in my diet, but I spend the money and get a really high quality micronized you know, whey isolate, not the cheap garbage crap that people get at Costco. Then when you actually look at the ingredients on it, it's like, it's not even, it's whey concentrate mostly, and it's like 30% isolate, and there's a bunch of other trash in there. But you're right. If you're farting, that's a sign, man. That's what I tell people. If you're super gassy, something's wrong.
Right. It's not there's research that supports, like, if you're flatulating more than 18 times a day, it's probably correlated with some form of gut dysbiosis. So like you could assume at least that, hey, that's just not. I know when I'm like peak performance, optimally firing on all cylinders, like having normal bowel movements, I'm not farting a lot. But I know when I'm not feeling great, I'm bloated or distended, I'm tired all the time, getting brain fogs, I need naps, I know that I'm farting a lot. So like just the first principles tells me that that's not good.
I laughed. Dr. Todd he talks about it all the time. He calls it pooping and digesting food like a dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Dude, ever since he said that, I've been looking at my dog's shit. I'm like, how's this motherfucker pooping? Like,
he's right though. But anytime you give the dog something off the menu, you give them a piece of pizza, they start farting and then they get diarrhea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's always happens. And if they got a really good, clean diet, the shit tightens up really fast.
Yeah. I mean, he said, if you're fully digesting your food, you shouldn't have to wipe.
That's a fucking fact, man. It's true. I use the Bristol stool chart for my clients, and usually want to be like type 4 or type 3 out of the 7 stool types. And the rarity of that kind of stool or that bowel movement is crazy to me. And it's just because I think truly a lot of people just don't like whole food. You talk a lot, you're just like a salt and pepper guy, but there's people who just like douse their shit in all sorts of sauces and seasonings and have to get really flavorant with their ways of cooking. And it's like sometimes that stuff isn't really beneficial.
Yeah, everybody makes fun of my super bland cooking, but I have IBS, man. So it's like even garlic. I have you ever had an all cat test done?
No.
Man, I went in and had an all cat test on it, and I'm like fucking allergic to everything, man.
Really?
Hundreds of things that came back. You know, garlic, onions, peppers. I mean, all these different things like the people. So I've worked with my gastroenterologist, but I stick with a low FODMAP diet. And I have my clients run a low FODMAP diet. I'll give them a list of approved foods that are all low FODMAP. And I found that if they stick to that, they generally have pretty good digestion.
Yeah, I do the same exact thing. I'm a selective dieter, so I do macros, but I count whole macros. And then I have like a menu essentially they can pick from. Like you said, it's just a list of proteins, a list of fats, a list of carbohydrates, and they can kind of choose from that. And then I even do a list of vegetables too. And
yeah, that's exactly how I do it, man.
Yeah, it's just the easiest way. It's like you can choose what you want, but it's all low FODMAP. We know it's going to digest well, and it's like if you can't find something in there that you love, there's at least 3,000 combinations of food. Like you're lost. You're out of luck.
It's funny how many common foods that bodybuilders eat are high FODMAP. Things like broccoli.
Oh yeah, it's
garlic.
Yeah,
onions.
Yeah,
stuff that I think even asparagus is high FODMAP.
Yep, asparagus, Brussels sprouts.
Yep, all these things, and then guys wonder why they have So the old chicken and broccoli thing is probably not good for you.
No, if you can eat like 100 grams a day, I've found, and then once you exceed 100 grams of like one of those dark cruciferous veggies, that's where things start getting a little funky. And you have to also consider the oxalate count. And this is, a little bit pedantic, but the oxalates do get passed through the kidney, and they're like little crystallized molecules that plants produce, and they can cause kidney damage. And if we're already putting our kidneys at a state of risk, having like an abundance of these oxalate containing compounds, things like cauliflower, broccoli, spinach, so on, might not be the best thing, especially like a contest prep or when you're administering a lot of compounds that would lead to renal issues. Then hey, maybe not so good.
Yeah, so many bodybuilders end up with fried kidneys. It's a very, very, very common thing. I was worried about I think I told you I was worried about my kidneys, and my EGFR came back. It was fine.
I heard that. Yeah, you had some pretty good blood work besides your hemoglobin A1C, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say good. It was the things like my A1C was high, my lipids were a little high, but those tend to be interrelated. At least in my experience, if your glucose metabolism sucks, it usually screws your lipids up.
Yeah. I use lipids as like a proxy for insulin sensitivity, so it's like a pretty one-to-one correlation. It's interesting though, because I think you said you took Lantus out, and then the hemoglobin the A1C came up.
Yeah, I have not been formally diagnosed, and I probably should go to a doctor at some point and get formally diagnosed. But everybody in my family, it's a really rare form of diabetes that my like my uncle and some other people in my family had. My grandmother had it. It's all on my dad's side of the family, but it's type 1B. So it's you're not fully. I probably had it my whole life. Looking back on it, and I just didn't know. But it's pancreatic insufficiency. It's not insulin resistance. So I'm like somewhere, I'm not like fully type 1. My pancreas still makes insulin, but just not enough.
That's so interesting.
What I speculate, because it
Yeah.
seems like things like metformin and semaglutide and stuff like that have had zero impact on my glucose levels. And so I just experimented. I pulled out, I really just did it to see what would happen. I pulled out the Lantus. I also ran out of it.
Yeah.
So I pulled out the Lantus in my for 2 months, and my A1C went, oop.
Yeah. I mean, it's good though, because you're, the best of people to maybe represent how beneficial it can be when you're pushing calories up, as far as just a low dose Lantus. Because if it kept your lipids under control and your A1C, and like, that's pretty hard to argue it's beneficial.
Yeah, and I've also seen, and I speculate that some older bodybuilders have pancreatic insufficiency as well, more so than insulin resistance from pounding carbs. I've seen like guys that I coach that are older and that can't grow, and then I throw in, they're running glucose levels a little high, not like, like I would say like in the pre-diabetic range.
Mm-hmm.
And then we throw in some Lantus, and all of a sudden, boom, they start growing.
Yep.
That's what happened to me. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think that was the biggest difference between that first year and the second year is I started using insulin.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, and I'm going to post a study about this later this week, but there's a very clear correlation with exogenous insulin usage and the modification of your gut microbiota to support carbohydrate metabolism and prevent things like leaky gut, which it's super interesting. And when we think about like pancreatic issues, a lot of it happens from immune response, and like potentially like something like a leaky gut causing pancreatic beta cell dysfunction and that leading to like diabetic states. So I think it's like all kind of intertwined. Your situations may be a little different, but for bodybuilders, it's like you're pounding food constantly. You're doing oral drugs that are deteriorating the endothelial wall. And it's like all these different things kind of, I guess, triangulate into like a catastrophe for organ health.
Well, I mean, you think about it over the long term, as somebody has been pounding it in bodybuilding for 10, 15 years, using GH, and you have this cycle of insulin resistance, and then your body has to crank out more insulin to keep up with the food that you're eating, and most of these guys don't take breaks from the food, and then you just I would imagine, I'm just speculating, that there's got to be, on top of the insulin resistance, even if you drop the GH and get your insulin resistance back in check, at some point you probably have burned your pancreas out, the beta cells.
Yeah, it's a lot of taxation. I mean, people aren't, as much as you can change a physique, I don't think it's normal to eat 6, 7. Some guys eat 8 meals a day, all causing insulin secretion. It's got to be stressful after years and years and years. There's no way it's not.
Well, we know that that's not a way to live a long time.
Yeah. When you look at longevity data, it's like, all right, well, basically starve yourself and eat enough to stay alive.
Yeah, I know Justin was talking about it. He said if I wanted to live to 100, I probably would just eat once a day.
Right. That's just no fun.
No. And he was on the discussion, and it's kind of an interesting discussion. How healthy is subjective.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, for me, I want to be optimized physically too. At the same time, I don't want to trash my organs in the process of doing it, but that may not be my goal. Is not to live till 100.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't want to be around in the post apocalyptic wasteland.
Yeah. I just think about, when I hear stuff like that too, I just think about Wall-E. Have you ever watched Wall-E?
Oh yeah.
And all the fat people sitting around like hover chairs that just get food directly delivered to their chairs, and robots serve them and they don't move at all. And they're all just like super obese. That's like the world I think about, because you could live for a very long time and be this completely, this bag of a human, right? This like sack of bones. But I don't think that's life. Like, I don't think there's women that are going to find that attractive. I don't think you'll make a lot of money doing life that way. I don't think like, when we talk about life, it's also not just lifespan, but health span. Like, what can I get on a plane and go travel around the world? Can I hike a mountain? Can I, lift a fuck ton of weight, which is fun for anyone? Can I fight some bad guys? Like, those are things that I just want to be able to do, and not having that ability because I chose a path of like, well, like David Sinclair is like 130 pounds. Like the dude is tiny, man. He's skin and bones. I'm like, I don't want to live like that. Like, I don't care if I get an extra 10 years. It's ridiculous. Like, what's the quality of those 10 years, you know?
I don't either. I'm the same way. I'd rather live a few less years than be like that. I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind when I'm at that point, but
yeah, maybe.
But I don't know, man. I would rather be optimized. That's just me. But there is a line to walk. I mean, what people do in bodybuilding is just utterly stupid. But
right, yeah, I think that, you know, realistically, I think there's a safe way to do. Like, there's really, I mean, like high blood pressure, you know, mineral imbalance and stuff. Like, those are the main things we need to worry about in bodybuilding. And most people just do that because they don't know much. Like, they don't know a good diet. They don't understand like actual pharmacy, like how to actually use drugs. They just say throw more at the problem. And I think if people could control blood pressure and water retention and heart rate and things like that, like a lot of these dudes wouldn't die as quick as people think bodybuilders die. I realistically believe that.
Yeah, I heard Dave Palumbo the other day talking about Nasser, and I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
But, you know, how he basically, I mean, he claimed that he could run crazy high doses and not having
like 5 grams or something a week.
Yeah, he was running like 5 grams a week, and that he got no side effects from it, but he had the side effect of dying.
Right.
but supposedly, you know, what Dave Palumbo was saying is that he, you know, and I remember this, nobody tracked their fucking blood pressure back in the day.
Yeah.
Nobody was even aware of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a new thing. That's like in the past 8 years, like John Meadows started telling everyone to, you know, start measuring your blood pressure and do your blood work. It's like, I remember back when I just started getting into the scene, like that still was rarely talked about, like checking your blood glucose or doing blood pressure measurements.
I was just lucky to have Dante Trudel as a mentor back in the day, because like 2003, 2004, he was telling me to manage my blood pressure.
Wow.
And nobody was back then.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was back then.
It's crazy. And it's wild to me too, because it's like dudes will start using gear with already existing hypertension, and then they go upwards from there. And it's just like, that trajectory is not going to look good. It only takes a little bit. Like, it doesn't take long being in that state for someone to have a negative outcome. I mean, I just think about things as like a time horizon. Like, how long is my kidney going to take like little brutalities from having hypertension? Probably not very long. You know, it's a very weak organ in reality. And it's like, it's the #1 cause of death in males in America. So it's like the easiest fucking thing you can do is measure your blood pressure. It takes 1 minute, and it's just like, even if it's just once a week, just fucking do it. You know, it's an insurance.
I have all my clients do it. I make them send readings on their check-ins.
Yeah.
And I also have them check their fasted glucose levels.
Mm-hmm.
I make them send them on check-ins too, just to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, I do heart rate and heart rate variability plus those as well. I think heart rate's important because you really realistically want to see like below 60 beats per minute to have a fit cardiovascular system. And I've seen dudes like 80, 90 plus, like hanging around town, just like not doing anything. I'm like, man, this is fucking not good. Like, you need to get
mine has never been that low, man, even in college. Ever.
That's it. You know, it's person dependent, right? It's your milieu, but I do believe that like, if it's not, it's something related to like, hey, you need to do a little bit more cardio. Like, I do cardio every day at subcapacity, and mine's, you know, my resting heart rate while I sleep is like 50 beats per minute, 53 beats per minute. And while I'm waking, like right now, it's probably like 80 because I just had a coffee, but it'll be back down to 60s pretty soon here.
Yeah, I guess I'm not that far. At night, mine is probably my resting heart rate's in the low 60s, I would say.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I just like, it's the way I think about it is you have the Daytona 500 NASCAR, and it goes around the lap a couple hundred fucking times, and by the end of it, the engine's like,
I'll check it right now. We'll see what it is sitting here talking to you. I had a giant thing of coffee.
And then you have like the Toyota, and it's, you know, RPMs are at like 9,000, 13,000 RPMs as it's going around the Daytona. And then you have a Toyota Camry that's on, you know, whatever generic ass highway, revving at, you know, 1,800 RPMs, 2,200 RPMs. And that thing lasts 500,000 miles, but the NASCAR only lasts the race. And it's just like, if your heart's 90 beats per minute continuously, it's like, that's the Daytona 500 car. You want to be the Toyota Camry and have because it's mechanical tension, the same thing as anything.
It was 73 sitting here.
That's not bad. Mine is, I lied, it's already 53 beats per minute. So I'm pretty, I also do take Nabivolol on rest days, so that could be part of it.
I mean, yeah, that's going to help.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to, like, if I get going really hard on a cycle, I'll have to throw in a calcium channel blocker. That'll pull it back down.
Yeah.
But the calcium channel blockers make me feel weird, though.
I don't fuck with that stuff, man. It's like I'm actually, a lot of people maybe follow my stuff, and I know a lot about drugs, but I'm pretty drug averse. Like, I don't like to do anything unless I find actual value in it. And so stuff like that, it's like, I don't like statins. I'm like, I get it, but the way it makes you feel, it's just, and the research supporting, like, it's weakening for ligaments and tendons. It's like, I don't even want to put myself in a situation to have some like, because long-term data is very sparse. So it's like, what if we create an epigenetic change and that sustains itself for the rest of our career after just doing that? It's like an SSRI, right? Like, you take an SSRI once and you have like this altered brain chemistry for a long time. Like, Steve talked about this, Vigorous Steve, because he did an SSRI. He came off and then he had like literal withdrawal symptoms for a very long time. And he said that was like one of the hardest things he's ever done. It was harder than PCT off of testosterone. And it's like, it's scary because there's a lot of guys who just say, like, just here, prescribe this, this, and this. And then it's like, those effects can be long-term and deleterious. And
I worry about
what those are.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you talk about the SSR or not, the statin thing, man. I've torn both of my ACLs, and both times when I tore them, I was on a higher dose statin at the time.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was this last tear. I wasn't even doing anything, man. I was just playing basketball, and it just blew out.
I mean, that's doing something.
I mean, but it wasn't like I cut or somebody hit me or anything like that, man. It was really.
Were you the weight that you are now?
No, this was 4 or 5 years ago. It was probably like 220, 230.
You weren't fucking massive.
And then the other one I did in my early 20s. I was skinny then, but
yeah. What's the trajectory for you? Like, what is your, like, I know we talked about it before, but is it still like compete, get a Masters Pro card, and maybe go?
I don't even know at this point, man. I keep getting injured, and I just, like, part of me is like, I don't like being this heavy.
Yeah,
I know everybody thinks it's cool being big, but it's not fun, man. Like, I literally, like, I get calf cramps walking with my girlfriend, and and then sleep sucks. Having to use a CPAP machine and eat all this food. It's a miserable existence, to be honest with you.
It is hard, man. And the food is like, people think steroids are expensive. It's like the food is what really fucking robs you money. Like, that shit can get so expensive when you're buying. I mean, at least for me, I eat a lot of meat, so I'm
eating 3 pounds of chicken a day.
Yeah,
usually.
Dude, it's terrible. It's like, that's several $100s a week, and then add in carbohydrates, and it's just like, fuck, dude, it's so much money. And I've thought the same thing. I'm like, man, is this really worth it? And then it's like, Fuad talks about this. It's like the 1 hour you step in the gym, it's like the best fucking time in the world. Then the rest of the hours outside of the gym are like, fuck, it's like shit. Would you use Tren in an off season?
I used to. I don't anymore.
How come?
It's just, I mean, it just makes my blood work go to shit, man.
Yeah. Did you heard that Samson just started using Tren for the Arnold?
Oh, right? I heard that, man.
That is the most insane shit I've ever heard. The man is almost 300 pounds, winning shows like mad, and he's just now using Tren. It's like,
Milo said he had to talk him into it.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know if I want to do it. I'm like, that's crazy to me. Like, he's right there, never used Tren, or he's used it but didn't like it, and then he's like, to swore it away, and now he's getting into it again. It's like, and he only got into it, I think he got up to his highest dose in that Arnold prep. Milo said was going to be maybe 300 milligrams per week. He hadn't done it yet, but when they started, it was only 25 milligrams, I believe, Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of thing, when he was talking about it on the podcast. And it just blew me away. It's like, people think it's such a necessity, and it's like, here this motherfucker is beating all sorts of bodybuilders who, rest assured, are probably running way more gear, and hasn't touched it. You know,
it reminds me of the stories of Ronnie Coleman back in the day when he was pro and didn't even know what steroids were.
Yeah, dude. It's so crazy, man. And Kai Green's the same way. I don't know if you've ever seen Kai Green when he competed naturally. It's just like this fucking monster of a man. And people say genetics don't matter. That's pretty fucking nuts to me. However, Nick Walker's a good case to make against the whole, because he wasn't that amazing even on gear initially.
No, he wasn't. But I know he's supposed to be an incredibly hard worker.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're Nick, you got to be sitting there thinking to yourself, you see this guy walk on the stage, beat you, that's never even used Tren before, and you're like, what the fuck do I do, man?
Yeah, that would be hard, man. That'd be so fucking hard. And he's not beating him by a little bit in my mind either. Like, you could argue I think Nick could have won that show easily, but Samson's bigger. He's just not as lean. Like, he's not as hard yet, but he's bigger, taller, has a much better physique in general. I think he needs to get his gyno taken care of. He has a little bit of gyno.
He definitely has gyno. We noticed that when we were going through it.
Yeah, but that's really it. Like, that dude, and Nick Walker, here he is. Probably I know he's pushed it pretty hard from what little bits he said, and I can only imagine. But that would be heartbreaking. You know? Yeah,
you got to be sitting there thinking to yourself, well, what's the point?
Right. Because he's still, like, Samson's still got all this trajectory he could unleash.
He can get better. He's got room to grow.
It's like, what the fuck? It's crazy, man.
I mean, he reminds me of Ronnie Coleman so much.
Yeah, he does.
Probably better flow, to be honest with you. He has a
realist. I mean, Ronnie I love Ronnie. Like, he's the fucking guy. I've talked to him recently when we went to the Olympia, but he the later years, man, his stomach did not look. His physique was just, I don't even know how to describe it. It looked like you blew a balloon up and then it started to deflate a little bit. And it wasn't a pretty look. Whereas, you know, Samson has that fucking pop and that just tiny cinched in waist. It's amazing.
I mean, I wonder how much, I know Milos blew him up, and I don't know how much credit to give Milos there, how much of it's just Samson's a freak.
Yeah, I think what happened, if my honest opinion, is Milos was the guy that, like, finally convinced him to say, like, hey, let's actually start using some dosage. Like, let's get you on a real cycle. I think, to be honest with you, and I've said this before many times, training doesn't really matter that much. It's a lesser variable when it relates to your diet and what gear you're taking. I believe training plays a large role, but outside of that, I mean, Milos is just having guys do high volume, what we know causes hypertrophy and a fuck ton of insulin. So, you know, it's going to make anyone grow, in my mind.
I want to give you a high five because people get so mad at me when I say it on my list of priorities of things that matter for bodybuilding. The training's number 3.
Yeah,
it's like I have diet, PEDs, and then training is the way I list it. And people are like, that's not true. Training's the most important.
Fuck,
I'm like, I see plenty of dudes training really hard in my gym that don't look like bodybuilders.
Yeah, and I just the same. I see dudes who have not taken a set to failure in their life, and they have, you know, 23-inch fucking arms. Like, it doesn't even fucking matter. It really, like, if the diet's the number one, that if you want your physique to change in like a couple weeks, the diet's the guy. And then drugs are just the additive to that. They're going to super physiologically boost the effect you get from the nutrition. And then training is just going to make your muscles look a little bit rounder and fuller. But if you're natural, the margin of error is like 10%. Like, you can step out of that 10% margin of error in your training and you probably won't experience much result. But when you're using gear, you have like a 70% margin of error that you can fuck up shit pretty bad and still make progress because you have that signaling pathway just ramped up all the time. So even if you cause enough to create an adaptive process, it's like that 70% is still enough to get the adaptation to continue. It doesn't matter, man. It's like, do what you love. That's my biggest thing. Like, preference comes first. If it's high volume, if it's high intensity, you're going to fucking get there, you know?
I don't know if you saw my video about Kevin Levrone, about him, how he would just like not train half of the year and blow up.
Yeah.
That's a prime example right there.
It's really fucking true, man. Had one of the best physiques in the world and looked like he looked like Paul before gear, like, type guy.
I mean, he's a local guy, so we used to see him around once in a while. And I actually, it's funny after I had that video posted up because everybody was like, it made me laugh because I guess I'm getting old, but people are like, that's lies. It never happened. And I'm like, yeah, it happened. But his nutritionalist from the 90s reached out to me and he's like, man, I had a front row seat. He's like, it was absolutely true. He goes, he's the only guy I've ever trained that where you feed him more food going into a show. He said he was eating like 8,000 calories a day going into a show.
That's wild, man. That's wild. I wish you could just as crazy as it sounds, I wish you could just dissect humans like that, do a genetic analysis, figure out what's different and like what their CAG repeats are, and just like copy and paste it to people. That'd be awesome.
I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's funny. Everybody gets so hung up on training. I mean, I'm not saying the training doesn't matter. Certainly it does. But I think you need to train like a bodybuilder first and foremost.
Yeah.
I see a lot of idiots that are in there, but none of it matters if your diet's not buttoned up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always put diet at the top. If I have the bodybuilding pyramid, I have diet at the top, then it's gear, and then it's training at the bottom.
Yeah. And it's really clear too. It's like evidence from clinical research supports like if you're overfeeding protein, you get a hypertrophic response without even mechanically overloading a muscle. So,
and it's really funny. Everybody talks about rest and recovery, but I think about a lot of these guys that are at the top of the pyramid in bodybuilding. Yeah. Those dudes aren't sleeping. They're out fucking partying all the time.
Right.
And, I'm not saying it's the best for you. I'm a 6-hour a night guy. I have been my entire life. Yeah. So probably means I'll die soon, but
I don't know. Like it's that whole thing. I think there's some merit to deloading or whatever, but I don't think it's as frequently as people maybe think it is or what they think it is. Like a lot of people think you need like a complete break, like one whole week off, no training. Like you have to take everything serious in aspects of recovery. And I truly think like Lee Priest said, like, he's like, what the fuck is a deload? Like, he never took a break or decreased volume. And I agree with that. Like, I think people get pussified a little bit too much. Like you're on gear, dude. You're on gear. You're eating fuck tons of food. Like you're fine. You might be a little tired, sleep some more, or maybe take a day off and then get back in the gym.
I do think you can overtrain, but I just don't.
It takes a lot.
This was another thing that I really upset people with. It I said that 99% of people aren't overtraining.
Yeah,
because there's this irrational fear in bodybuilding of overtraining that just perplexes me.
Yeah, it's like you go into the gym one week and you get a lower number than you hit the last week, or you do one less rep or whatever. It's like, oh, I need a fucking deload. It's like, dude, that shit happens. Like it's just, you're not always going to be perfect. Sorry. It's next week you'll come back and you'll probably be even better.
I mean, bodybuilding's literally the only sport where people have deluded themselves into thinking that working less yields better results.
Yeah, that's so true.
Taking time off. I'm just like, I think about the NFL. I mean, the level of output that those guys have, and they're not doing deloads.
No, it's fucking insane, man. And yeah, you want to talk about dedication? Like those dudes are getting head injuries left and right. It's fucking wild. And they train year round. Say baseball players, like I know I've coached some professional baseball players. Holy fuck, man. They don't take breaks. They're required to train even the minor league guys have to show up every practice 6 days a week to get a paycheck of like $4,000 a month. Like every day. There's no not practice. It's like, it blows my mind. And people are like, your muscles your muscles might get fatigued if you're training like an asshat and you're not sensibly, structuring your workouts, but it's so rare. And you really have to be advanced to push yourself to a point where you are going to overtrain. Like, someone like, Jordan Peterson, like I think he could overtrain. I really do, because he can lift so much weight and stimulate so much of his muscle in lifting that weight. But someone who's 3 years into this, like you're probably not going to be able to overtrain if you wanted to. You just don't have the capacity to.
I'm sorry, but if you're looking at Instagram between sets and you're not sweating when you're walking out the door, you have zero chance that you're overtrained.
Yeah.
I just don't. I literally saw a guy in the gym the other week that was looking at TikTok while he was doing leg presses. I'm like, you are not generating enough effort to be worried about overtraining. If you
that reminds, I trained with a guy. He was like a football player. And he found me on Instagram, and he's like a 21-year-old kid, and he's like, I want to train with you, see what it's really like. I'm like, fine, man. Like, if you want to do it, let's train legs. Two extra. We were on the leg press after doing a hamstring curl, and the second set of leg press, he started puking, and then the third set, he said he had to go home. Like, he couldn't do it anymore. I'm like, this is the, you know, like, you have to push that hard. It's like, that's the requirement. And I still had pendulum squat. I still had leg extensions. I still had lunges. Like, you underestimate, like, people think they're working so hard. It's I found many times, if, like, I had a very awesome opportunity to train with Branch Warren once, and while his training is wild, like, just doesn't make sense to me, the amount of effort that man applies in a single hour is more than most people can do in a single week. Like, it is outrageous. And it showed me, like, we have a lot more than we give ourselves. You know, it's,
yeah.
People would say, oh, I better take it easy, or, oh, that was enough. It's like, how do you know that was enough?
I mean, you think about it, like, just, you're a military guy, man. Think about, like, what the Navy SEALs go through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great fucking point. And they're fine.
I mean, the sleep deprived, training all day. I mean, lifting weights, you know, swimming. I mean, those guys are pushing everything past the limit, and
yeah,
you know, they do just fine.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's just up here.
A lot of it is, it's all mental, man. And I, like, my whole prep, I didn't do a single deload. Like, I didn't stop training once. It's like, I've never done that. And it's just like, these people talk about, like, we need a reset week during prep. I'm like, I don't know if you do, though. I just think, like, maybe having a diet break might be useful, but that would be, like, the one time where I think, okay, we could decrease volume and reduce intensity a little bit. But outside of that, like, small window of time, like 4 weeks out from a show, I just don't have a justification to say, okay, we need to completely take you out of training.
I think I've only ever been overtrained once in my entire life, and that was on contest prep one time, where I like got to the end and I literally could not do 2 plates on the leg press. I think my CNS just completely shut down.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing too. You'll know when it fucking hits you. Like, you will know. And it rarely have I ever worked with anyone where it's like a fact that they're overtrained. Like, sometimes it's just like they're tired. It's like, okay.
I think it was Broderick Chavez. I don't know. I think it was him that said a deload is like toilet paper. You know when you need it.
It's true. Very true.
I mean, but you're right. There were no deloads. I mean, fuck, I never even heard of it until the early 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talk to anyone, like you talk to Lee Labrada, he talks about it too. He's like, we never took a break. Like, you're always posing year round. You're always training. You're a bodybuilder. It's your full-time job. Like, what do you mean? And Milo says the same thing. And it's like, you know, I'm listening to these guys because they have, you know, well over 50 to 100 pros under their belt. They're pros themselves. It's like, they've been here, done that. And it's just, like, hard to argue. I don't know. Like, if Olympic athletes who are potentially natural, probably not, but potentially are fine. If you have dudes running ultra marathons that are 200, 300 miles long continuously without taking a break, and having done that after running hundreds of miles each and every week leading up to that, I'm sure you're going to be fine lifting a couple weights for 3 or 4 sets. Like, it's not going to kill you.
I think Justin was talking about this recently, but like his humans, when we originally started hunting, when we were cave dwellers, we would hunt animals to exhaustion. That's how that was our, well, intelligence was our advantage, but endurance was our advantage. They would literally chase down that elk or whatever until it just ran out of gas and then kill it.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason why we're so efficient at being metabolically flexible. We can use glycogen or carbohydrate. We can use fatty acids, like, pretty readily available, whatever's most present or needed. It's like, you can run out of glycogen. Guess what? Your liver's going to start producing it. Like, you can keep going. You know, people get too scared of this stuff.
I mean, we would hunt in starved states.
Yeah. This is like chronic, you know. What interesting question though, because this is something I noticed at the Arnold actually, was Nick Walker's legs came down tremendously. We're talking about overtraining, so I'm curious on your thoughts. Like, did you see his legs come down? Because we were like sweep came down pretty drastic.
we were talking about it on our Arnold Classic review that his legs definitely were down. I think now this I wouldn't say this is overtraining, but I think that guys overdo the cardio on prep, and especially the step mill. I think that's where I've seen just me with people that I've worked with. I've seen so many people lose their legs on the step mill.
Yeah. I've always seen that too, and I'm curious as to why that happens.
It's got to be glycogen depletion, right?
Yeah, it's got to be that, or maybe you are just the actual mechanical load of moving yourself up that step mill is too much to recover from, because you're doing it like almost every day. It just goes in reverse. At a certain point, we have, there's some research that supports, like, if you have delayed onset muscle soreness past 72 hours, you're actually catabolizing more tissue than anabolizing in some situations. Now, I think that's probably different for people who are enhanced, but as far as natural people go, so there could be something there where, like, you do potentiate catabolism by way of not letting recovery happen.
Well, the body's very adaptive. We know that, and you don't see anybody that's climbing Mount Everest with 32-inch quads.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, you just don't.
True. Yeah. That's very, very true.
So, but I've seen so many people melt their legs on prep. I've done it myself, man. I completely melted my legs on contest prep, and I got big legs.
Yeah.
And they just evaporated. But I found, like, when I walk on the treadmill, if I just do lists and keep the cardio lower and let the diet do the work, like this past year, I don't think I went over 30 minutes of cardio.
Yeah.
And I just did the treadmill. I just walked or walked outside, and my legs hung on pretty well.
Yeah. The most I did this last prep was, and my glutes were so strutted I could feel the ripples in them. It was nuts. I only did 40. The most I ever got up to, which was only for a week, was 45 minutes, 5 times a week. And that was on an inclined treadmill. And then the biggest thing I focus on, which some people do, some people don't, but is steps. Like, I try to get an average step count of about 10,000, and that's pretty much all I need. I do love the recumbent bike, though. I think that's, like, one of the, for me at least, it's a really good one, because I feel like it gets a ton of blood in my quads, and it isn't stressful to them, but I get a huge pump in my fucking legs. It's really weird.
Now, you do see cyclists with huge quads.
Yeah, there's that one motherfucker, man, who is like 34 inches. It's fucking crazy. Huge quads.
Yeah, no, that is one exception to an endurance athlete with big legs. So,
yeah,
I mean, you do see that. I'll cycle now and then. I used to cycle a lot. Usually my cardio, I'll start off at the beginning of prep on the elliptical. I used to use the step mill. I don't do that anymore, and then I just transitioned to just walking afterwards.
Yeah. So you think Nick maybe did a little bit too much cardio?
I'd probably just do too much cardio, would be my guess.
I think so too, because he got so much leaner, and he said he was eating more food, so the only variable would be just easily more cardio. Like, the extended duration of his cardio is too long for him, maybe, and that just brought his legs down. Who knows?
I mean, you think about it. How long had that dude been on prep?
Fuck.
I mean, you pretty much just have to come out of the Olympia and just go straight back into at least a maintenance phase.
Yeah. Which he said he kind of did, but I'm curious as to, like, what, I don't know, like, it's very strange, because they were, for me at least, they were notably, like, very notably smaller, and it's just like,
they were significantly smaller. We noticed it.
Yeah, like, even his adductors were, like, they had that, he had a gap between his legs, and he usually doesn't have that. I'm like, how the fuck does that happen over the span of, it was 6-7 weeks in between, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, the Olympia was a little longer. It was probably 2 months, right? Because the Olympia was in December.
Yeah. It was about 2-ish months.
10 weeks, something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, even that's like a pretty, I don't know. I would have imagined he would have came back fuller, maybe a little bit leaner, but it seemed like he was almost flatter. I don't know.
Well, I heard him saying that they were trying to push conditioning. He wanted to be the best conditioned.
Right.
I mean, that's always a sacrifice that you play when you're trying to be the most conditioned.
And I think if Samson didn't show up and Andrew didn't show up, I think he would have won easily. Like, it's just, he was up against probably the most favorably composition dudes in the whole fucking IFBB right now. Like, smallest waists in the game.
I was impressed with Ramy. Ramy looked great.
Yeah, that's another thing, man. And a lot of people are like, he got robbed. I think he did get a little bit robbed because his conditioning was amazing. Like his side leg on that side bicep, man, or side chest was outrageous. Like the striations went all the way from his knee up to his hip. Like it was insanity. And he placed fourth, right? And then Sean fifth. Yeah. And man, I'm like, how did that fucking happen? I will say it was interesting. I did like a social experiment. I was with some friends at the time. I was at that birthday party I was at, and I'm like, I'm curious, who do you think has a better physique? And I chose Samson and Big Ramy. And everyone said Big Ramy's legs. They're like, what's wrong with his legs? I was like, that's interesting. Like everyone immediately jumped to that. Or, one girl said like, oh, he has pumpkin legs, like gross. I'm like, interesting. And they all said they'd prefer Samson as a physique over Big Ramy, not knowing anything about bodybuilding, which I thought was intriguing.
I would have had him in third place, but
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, that was. I'm gonna pull a video of him up. That it was pretty.
I know people posted like pictures too. Yeah, like this is fucking insane, man. Like that is way better than he was at the Olympia. I think his lats still have a little funky stuff going on, and his triceps are definitely a little bit flat, but it's still hard to deny that.
And check this out, man.
Yeah, that's from his fucking knee to his hip, man. It's just insane.
Look at that.
What the fuck is that, dude?
I mean, he's got some ridiculous hamstrings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, his conditioning was ridiculous. I mean, shredded glutes. Look at that.
It's fucking nuts.
Yeah, but you're right. He's still got that thing where his lower back is.
Yeah, it's just like
he just doesn't have any lower lats. Which, I know people speculated that it was nerve damage. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not.
Well, the weird thing is like someone can't just have no lower lats. This is why it's weird, because it's like the lat insertion has to come from your humerus essentially up at the top of your rib cage down to your lower lumbar, right? Like it has to connect. That's like where it has to connect.
Yeah.
And it's one singular muscle. It's not like it's divided into sections up your back. It's like, well, there's different strands, but it's for the most part, it's a strip.
Yeah, it's one muscle.
Yeah. So it's like, how does that happen? And I can't think of anything, like there's no medical diagnosis for this kind of stuff. So it's interesting how this would even happen. It has to be, I just don't even know. It might even just be something as stupid as his fucking posing, like realistically. I don't know.
I mean, it could, yeah, you're 100% right. It could be his posing. And I can't tell you, I talk to people all the time, how much posing matters, man, how you can win or lose a show. But I mean, yeah, you can look here at the anatomy of the lat. You can see, I mean, it is one muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Unless he's just
the humerus and
unless he's just not activating that bottom part of it for some reason.
I don't know.
I mean, I would, maybe if you had some sort of damage in your lumbar spine that it wouldn't activate down here. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. I just think maybe like, I don't know. I know that like a lot of the new school training stuff gets a little bit, people mentally masturbate with like training mechanics and stuff too much these days. But I do think there's some merit into some of the lat exercises that have been recently like really honed in to train like the lower lats. And I noticed a lot of old school guys don't do that. So maybe he's just not efficiently training those lower lats. And as he's getting older, the muscle accretion rates are a little bit shittier for him, and thus not getting a lot of volume on that lower back might be causing some atrophy. I'm not sure, man. It's fucking weird to me. I've been curious because people say like it's nerve damage, but if it was nerve damage, like theoretically, wouldn't his whole lat not be functioning appropriately? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand the physiology of it enough to speculate on that. But yeah, I would think it would affect his whole lat. Dr. Todd was talking about, and you went down the training, but he was talking about how Ramy doesn't deadlift or do any barbell rows or anything like that anymore. It's all braced machine stuff. Mm-hmm. So maybe that had something to do with it.
Yeah, there's no erector work, and
because he had said that his erectors had looked like they had atrophied too.
Yeah, and they do. I mean, they're flat. Like that's men's physique guys have larger erectors than Ramy does right now. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, I mean, and there is a thing in bodybuilding now where most guys aren't doing deadlifts or squats anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't, but I'm old.
Fuck that shit. I do. I guess I do deadlifts. I shouldn't say that. I do, but it's dumbbell deadlifts. You know, it's not like
I mean, I do stiff-legged dumbbell deadlifts, but I do that more as a hamstring exercise. But I mean, it is getting your lumbar as well. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. But he looked great, I thought, other than the lower back issues. I mean, his conditioning was on point.
Yeah, it was surprising to me to see where he placed, because everyone was thinking like, oh, he'll come back, and then they said the dents in his quads were gone, which they fucking were. They're completely gone. I'll give it to him. It's I don't know how they did that, whether that was synthol or who knows. I don't know. If it was the stem cells, that's crazy. I don't see that physiologically actually happening somehow, but it, like, tissue regrowth is such a long-term thing. I don't see that happening in that short amount of time, but I don't know.
It's got to be some sort of sarcoplasmic response, right?
Maybe. Yeah.
In the short term.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they just blew his peak at the last show.
I think so too. He was obviously flat, and he just was so.
I'd heard a rumor too that he had gotten sick. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know, man. But then it's like Urs was sick for the classic physique, Arnold, and he fucking looked amazing. He placed second and looked better than he did at the Olympia.
Well, he's also not 300 pounds.
That's true. That does change a lot of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot less to work with there. You know, it's probably easier to fill back out. And, you know, when you're dealing with a big bodybuilder, man, it's tricky filling out a guy that size, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can. And I know for me too, like, just as a variable, like it takes me a little bit to flatten out. Like, I can be full 1 second and I need to eat so much fucking food. Like, I can go without food for a little too long and I'm flat, and it's super annoying. So I know that with someone like him, I can only imagine the response. Like, you have to feed carbohydrates almost like a drip feed, you know. It'd be more efficacious to almost have like an IV glucose administration for him at that point. I can't imagine like what it takes.
I heard Mila Sarchev talking about carbing up Dennis Wolf.
He did.
Yeah, where you'd have to eat like 3,000 grams of carbs.
And he has talked. I thought you were going to bring up. He talked about IV glucose, because he's definitely talked.
Oh, did they? I didn't know they. I didn't know they did
that. He definitely talked about that, and it was like a obscure podcast, but he talked about using IV glucose before. It was like, holy fuck, dude.
Well, I don't know how the hell you would eat 3,000 grams of carbs
and stay like even like you could try, but like my gut would be fucking disgusting.
Well, you'd have to use insulin. There's no way you could possibly eat that much.
No, you'd have to use a fuck ton. Like, there's absolutely no way that's normal.
And it'd have to be all majority simple sugars. I mean, like, shit, that would be, I'm trying to do the math on it. So there's that would be 60 cups of rice.
Holy shit, man. Yeah, that's insanity. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, there's no way.
That's not happening. That's gross. No. Your mouth would be so dry after like 3 of those.
Poop in a cinder block.
Fucking gross.
You need a crowbar to get the shit out of you.
Oh my god! Have you ever done an enema? What do they call an enema for peak week or anything?
No, I've never done. I thought I needed one. Oh, dude, this is a funny story, man. I had a contest prep. I was so dried up at the end. I didn't like shit the whole last week, man. I was sitting on the toilet crying, trying to get stuff out.
Yeah.
And nothing would come out. And it was hilarious. Like, after the show, I went like on my binge eat. And we were coming down the highway driving home, and I thought I was gonna have to shit in the ditch on the side of the highway. It just like all came out at once, man. I had to pull into a gas station, and it was just like the most disgusting toilet ever. And I'm like, I don't care. It was one of those ones where it was over the water. It was like it was like weeks worth of stuff.
That's awesome.
Oh man, you get so dried up at the end, especially like I think that time I was doing 0 fats at the end. So
Oh yeah, that's gonna fuck you up.
yeah, no, that's bad news. I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna do that again.
Yeah, I always have when food gets low, it's always like it becomes people talk about digestion and prep, and it does get worse, but and you can mitigate it in some ways, but it's pretty normal because you're just, I mean, the reality is you're not eating nearly as much food as you were, so it's going to be more infrequent. But
Yeah, I remember I thought about getting an enema, and I was like, man, I just don't want to mess anything up.
I've always been curious to be like, man, that'd be kind of useful because especially because I'm in classic and pulling a vacuum is so essential. Like dumping everything out would be kind of nice.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, I don't know what it would if it would have any effect on
like loading.
I mean, because water and whatnot, because so much of that's
yeah, potentially your GI uses a lot of that, and technically, I mean, if you displace, because the water you drink has to travel through your small intestine, so like if you're displacing the mucosal layer or anything like that, I don't imagine that happening though, unless you're maybe doing like a coffee, it's like a little acidic, like a coffee enema or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying everything. I was trying every kind of laxative and stuff. At the end, nothing was getting me going, man.
Right. I've been there too. It's crazy how stuck you could get. Like nothing, magnesium citrate, even pharmaceutical laxatives, like won't do shit.
Oh no, yeah, I was like using everything, man. But man, as soon as I drank some water and ate some French fries,
fuck yeah, that fat and carb. Ooh.
it hit me about a half an hour after I left the restaurant. I'm like, oh man, this is not good.
Oh shit, dude. Yeah, I have a YouTube video like almost 5 years ago now, where it was like my first show. I won my pro card in the PNBA, and I went on like a rampage of food. Like I just bought as much as I could, just clicked record on the camera, set it up, and had like a table full of shit. And I remember that day, man. I was miserable. Like I was shitting, I was like vomiting, everything was coming out of everywhere. I was like, that was the last time I ever did anything like that. I was like,
man, this was the show that I went hyponatremic afterwards too.
Really?
Yeah, I drank like 2 gallons of water right after the show. Man, bad idea. I warned people about that, and it just like flushed everything out.
Yeah.
And I woke up the next day, and my fasted glucose level was like 400.
Jesus.
And I couldn't see, man. Like my vision was blurry.
That's crazy. Yeah, I learned about that in the military because dudes would pound water all day because we'd be rucking or something.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't eat salt or eat food. It would just be drinking water. And then they'd start having seizures, and it wasn't because they were hyponatremic. They just didn't have enough sodium or even potassium. And that shit's scary, man. Like their brain shuts down, like their organs it's fucking scary.
Well, I mean, you hear of marathon runners and shit dying from it sometimes.
Yeah.
From drinking too much water. So like now after shows, I'll hit the sugar-free Gatorades.
Yep.
Or sugar-free Pedialyte.
I'll do the Pedialytes and coconut water is what I'll typically do.
Yeah, I definitely learned my lesson about that. I was so thirsty from the diuretic and water depletion. I just went ape shit and then ate a bunch of sugar on top of it. And then when your electrolytes are all out of whack, your body can't pull up any of the carbs.
I'm glad you're fucking fine, dude. That's scary shit.
Oh yeah, you can die from that.
Yeah, you can like 400 milligram per deciliter blood glucose is dangerous enough. That's terrifying.
Yeah, when I couldn't see, when everything looked like it was.
So you're like, oh, there's something wrong.
Yeah, something's wrong. I probably should go get this checked out.
Yeah, a little bit.
The stupid shit you do for contest prep.
All
right, man, I got to wrap this up. That was fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I got to get pissed anyway. So,
ladies and gentlemen, don't go blind for a show. It's not worth it.
Never worth it.
And I got third place in that one too. So in my class, so it wasn't even
almost qualified for nationals.
I looked like shit, and then I drank a bunch of water. So third place is not worth dying for.
No, sir. No, sir.
All right, Colton, I appreciate you. I'll put all your contact information in the description below if people want to get a hold of you. Guys, go follow this guy. He should be a superstar right now. He knows way more than I do. It makes no sense to me that I have more followers than you. But we'll work on that, man. We'll get you up there. You're one of the smartest people out there, I think, right now. Your content you're cranking out is fantastic.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care.
Deuces.